You're listening to a CNA podcast. Bullying in school is nothing new. But in some parts of East Asia, the victims aren't students, they're teachers. Some say the harassment they get from pupils and parents has gone way too far. That's part of a viral video shared by the Jeonbuk Union of Teachers in South Korea. You can hear the teacher recording the video gasping because it shows a boy in third grade, he's 11 years old, slapping the vice principal. He was trying to stop the boy from leaving school without permission when the kid hit him. From South Korea to Japan, some educators have reached a breaking point. I'm Teresa Tang. Yim Suk joins me from Seoul and Michiyo Ishida from Tokyo to talk about the mental and physical abuse of educators and why the system is failing them. Good morning, ladies.
Good morning, Teresa.
This story is so shocking to me. I grew up in Vancouver in Canada, and I never heard of this kind of behavior towards teachers. I still keep in touch with the woman who taught me when I was 12 years old. Shout out to Deborah Patterson. And to this day, I just adore her. What was your experience growing up, Yoon-suk?
Well, I did all my education also not here in South Korea, but overseas, because I went to an elementary to high school at an international school in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. And like you, I had fantastic teachers. In fact, there was this one essay teacher who taught me about writing, and that's why I enjoyed writing essays the most when I was in school then. And maybe, that's why I ended up being a reporter. But it was a British school, and so compared to the American school system, we had strict rules, we had strict teachers, but yes, nothing like this behavior when I was growing up too.
Well, I started schooling in New York City, went on and off to American school in Tokyo, and went to 8th and 9th grade in São Paulo, Brazil. I really haven't kept in touch with my teachers because I was moving so much. Those were the days of airmails. But overall, I respected my teachers. I thought they were knowledgeable, protective if you were a good student, and they could be scary because those were the days when if you didn't behave, you could get corporal punishment. So I try to behave.
Yeah, exactly. So Yoon-suk, when I watched your story and I saw that video of the boy hitting the vice principal, I was just so shocked. When you first saw it, what went through your mind?
Well, let me first point out that I think this was a very extreme case. It was shocking. To me, I couldn't believe what I was seeing and that something like this could be happening here in South Korea. But also, I was very shocked to see that this vice principal was not stopping the boy, by grabbing his hands or doing anything to make him stop. And I didn't understand at first, but when I was speaking to some of the teachers and the experts while I was doing this story, they were saying that they were not shocked at all because if the vice principal did grab the boy's hands to get him to stop, or even in self-defense, and the principal, say, for example, left red marks or even a bruise on the boy's hands, the vice principal would likely be charged with child abuse. And so the vice principal, what he did was he was really helpless and he didn't do anything. And in fact, he had his hands behind his back while he was being slapped by this 11-year-old boy. And, Teresa, I think this incident really did shock the whole nation because there were just weeks and weeks of news and reports about this and the issues that teachers faced here in South Korea, the abuse that they had to put up with by the parents and also the students. But I don't think anybody here in South Korea was prepared for something like this.
Michiyo, can you picture anything like this happening in Japan?
Well, kids attacking teachers is something you don't really hear much about in Japan as a social problem. Maybe it's because of the discipline here. Since first grade, children are supposed to greet the teacher in unison to start class, and at the end of each class, they thank the teacher. And students take turns to serve hot lunch, for instance. They eat with the teacher. And after classes are all over, they are supposed to clean their homeroom before going home. And if you talk about abuse towards teachers in Japan, well, schools are actually abusing them. Teachers work more than 14 hours a day. They're required to be around to supervise after school activities. They have to attend faculty meetings. They do non-teaching jobs that cannot be outsourced because the schools lack the budget. They have to deal with so-called monster parents who complain many times, demand the teachers to do more. And I've heard of a case where one educator said that a parent requested the teacher help get the child out of bed to go to school.
What? Okay, that's extreme. So it sounds like in Japan, the issue is more teacher burnout and stress. And in one of your stories, Mitch, you talk about how teachers in public schools put in an average of 96 hours of overtime a month, which puts them at risk of something called karoshi, death from overwork. What?
Yes, well, karoshi is actually a common term used in Japan, meaning a death from overwork. It's not limited to schools, but it's a wider social problem. In financial year 2023, for example, there were 4,598 labor insurance payments requested for karoshi, according to the Ministry of Health, Labor, and Welfare. It's 1,000 more than the year before. School teachers are not on the top of the list for karoshi, but there are more facing the risk. Most are believed to work more than the limit authorities set, which is 80 hours as the border. Now, why do they work so much? Well, teachers who have been on a job for more than a decade tell me they actually love children and they feel that their mission is to do their utmost for the children. But among them, there are those who just hit the limit and fall ill. Now, Miss Chiharu Kurema is one school teacher I spent some time with. I spent some time with her in her classroom and I've been going around with her. She's been teaching for 18 years, but even she was close to a mental breakdown. So let's hear from her.
There was a period where I lost my hearing in one ear. When I could not hear at all, I went to the hospital and received treatment for about a month and a half. At that time, those who were working with me suffered from mental health issues, and many began to take leave. Their stories and following up on the work they left behind really stressed me out.
Yoon-suk, your story and your discussion segment on the program East Asia Tonight on the viral video sort of went viral itself. There were more than 1,000 comments on your story, and I was reading through some of them, and a lot of former teachers actually shared their own experiences. And they said something similar happened to them in South Korea, that they were hit, they had things thrown at them, all sorts of verbal abuse, and 99% were pointing blame in the same direction, and that was at the parents. Firstly, what was your reaction to the response to your story?
Well, yes, I saw that too. And in fact, in about 2 weeks after that story went out, there were more than 400,000 viewers on YouTube. And I was shocked to see that so many people had watched this story. And then I realized that this wasn't really just a Korean problem, but something that everyone around the world in different countries these days could relate to and had something to say about it. And so lots of people were leaving comments, a lot of them saying that the boy should be expelled or that his parents were to be blamed, or one person even saying that this was happening elsewhere where the traditional disciplines is now considered as child abuse. And there was even one comment from someone in the United States saying, I thought this was only happening in the US. Now, but there was just one comment that got me thinking and really sort of like touched me, was this person who said that perhaps this boy was autistic and undiagnosed at the least. Now, this person had taught here in South Korea, was a teacher here, and that person was saying that there's no such thing as special education in South Korea, no social workers, speech teachers, or counselors to help the children with learning disabilities. Now, these children, according to this comment, are put in the same classrooms with the others based on pressure by the parents who don't want the kids to be left out. Now, when I saw that, it sort of like hit me, and it made me realize that it was true. And so I started asking around some of the teachers, the parents that I spoke to, and it's true that parents don't want to admit that their child has an issue. And even if the school tells them that the child needs some counseling or has a learning disability, most parents here would ignore it. Like, in this case, this boy, apparently he went to like 7 different schools. And his parents were told by these schools to get counseling for this boy, but the parents refused. And so, in a way, my heart goes out to this little boy and, wish his parents would get some professional help for him. But in general, here in South Korea, the main problem is that Koreans are having fewer children. Now, the country has the world's lowest birth rate. And, there is data showing that most South Korean parents now only have one child. And in fact, in 2022, more than 6 out of the 10 babies were first children for South Korean parents. And so, I guess parents end up overprotecting their children. And in fact, Chung Jae-hoon, a professor of social welfare at the Seoul Women's University, explained to me like this.
There is a unique aspect of Korean society which could be described as intense family-centric or even family self-interest attitudes. Parents invest heavily in their children and cannot tolerate the feeling that their child has been wronged. This distorted sense of parental privilege, combined with the high value placed on their child's education, leads to the violation of teachers' rights.
Yeah, it's a story about education, but also demographics. That's a good point, Yoon-suk. So, Mitch, if the work is hard, the pay is not great, and there's a shortage of people wanting to be in this profession, what are officials doing to turn things around? Because clearly something has to change, right? Your report says that application rates have dropped drastically because the younger generation is shunning this profession.
Correct. Well, so school teachers have been telling me they are worried about the quality of education with anyone who basically applies to become a school teacher with the right qualification can get the job. But there's another issue. 4.9% of newly employed public school teachers in Tokyo in 2023 resigned within a year. So that tells you something, that they're not happy with the job. The main reason, according to the local education committee, is for personal reason. And that personal reason are mostly due to illness, in particular due to mental illness. Now, following petitions by 900,000 educators, the government is set to raise overtime work payment from 4% of the teacher's salary to 10%. This means it will be the first hike in about half a century.
Oh my gosh.
But, there is no assurance workloads will be reduced. And educators here think reducing their workload is most important for their mental well-being.
Exactly. Some people might say, it doesn't matter how much you pay me. If it's still really stressful, I can't do it. Yoon-suk, okay, back in South Korea last July, a first grade teacher in Seoul very sadly took her own life. And your report talks about how her death galvanized people and officials took action.
Well, yes, it is sad and unfortunate to see that those changes were made after that teacher took her own life, and she was only 23 years old. But data also shows that since 2018, more than 100 public school teachers took their own lives here in South Korea. But, I think that incident of the 23-year-old teacher just really cracked open this sort of like this sickness, this disease that had existed for so long, the thing that the teachers had felt inside and they were suffering from. And it just opened up because after her death, there were other teachers who started speaking out, and they were coming out to the streets and making their voices heard. And so there were protests, daily protests for some time here. And people started noticing and started to realize that this was a serious issue in their schools. And so you have President Yoon Suk-yeol ordering officials to try and find out what it was and to try to find ways to protect the teachers. And even the National Assembly also passed a new law known as the Teachers' Rights Restoration Bill, which gives some protection for the teachers and also financial support for any child abuse cases. Now, because before, the teachers here would have to deal personally with all the complaints, the lawsuits by parents. Now, that's no longer the teacher's responsibility, but the responsibility of the principal. And also, in the past, the teacher's personal data, like their mobile phone numbers, would be given out to parents, but that is no longer possible. And so these measures haven't really solved the issue, the basic issue, but teachers I speak to say that at least there is this awareness and that is a start. And they're glad that at least, people are aware that this is a serious issue here in Korea.
Michiyo, clearly we know meaningful change will take time. In the meantime, how are teachers in Japan coping?
Okay, well, some teachers are making their own efforts. I had a chance to join a group of public school teachers trying to support each other by forming a so-called education circle. Now, public school teachers in Tokyo are employed by the Tokyo metropolitan government, and they're basically transferred to another school once in 6 years. And the founder of the Education Circle, who is a member of the Tokyo Metropolitan Government Education Committee, contacted teachers he knew from the past. And it was right during the COVID-19 pandemic. They started to meet online, first to address problems they face, share how they can improve classes, and also share creative ways to play with children during recess. This teacher circle did not help all from staying in the school system, in the profession. I actually met a few who decided to resign. But to Ms. Shiharu Kurayama, who we heard from earlier, the education circle has been useful. So let's hear from her again.
Here, everyone breaks out of their shells. We become the children, and we learn a lot. The way I speak to the children, the way I deliver my conversation, I learn everything here.
And before we go, I want to get both of your thoughts on the future of this profession. There's really only so much officials can do. Do you think societal mindset, societal values will change? And will parents learn to be better for the sake of their children, Yoon-suk?
Well, I wish parents would. There was a saying here in Korea in the past, and not too long ago, because I used to hear it when I was living here in Korea, that you wouldn't even dare to walk in the shadows of a teacher because that's how much there was respect that people had for the teachers in this country where seniority, elders are greatly respected. And like Japan, South Korea is seeing a decline in the number of people who want to be teachers now. And so this is a serious issue. South Korea has the world's lowest birth rate, and many schools here are closing because there are no students to fill up those classrooms. And what would happen to South Korea if you don't have teachers to go in and teach those students? And so it is a very serious issue that I think the people are starting to realize. But speaking to the experts and teachers, many of them saying, and I think, this is an issue that's not going to go away very soon, but at least the teachers say, and I think it's true, that the awareness is there. And so they're saying there is some hope, at least for now.
Yeah, well, what I feel is the foremost is to reduce the burden on school teachers. They're there to teach students, but they have so many roles they have to play because of all the burden on them. And one that is important is that the schools can outsource a lot of other activities other than teaching from the school teachers. And I'm hearing that is starting. For instance, they're outsourcing to people who are interested in for instance, the neighborhood of the schools, to volunteers, and that is starting. Another is parents. Parents should be more responsible for their children, not demanding the teachers to do more than teaching. So that's another area that the whole society should look into. So it is really important that the teachers' burden is reduced and that more people in Japan would want to be high quality teachers, because that will be an important source, for education. And to educate children is the best thing for the future of Japan.
Exactly. Well said, Michiyo. And Yoon-suk, like you said, the first step to solving a problem really is awareness. And your reports have certainly generated that. Thank you both so much for coming on and sharing this with me today.
Thank you, Teresa.
Thank you.
And a reminder that the TV episodes of CNA Correspondent air every Wednesday at 9:30 p.m. Singapore, Hong Kong time. And you can find both Yoon-suk's and Michiyo's reports on YouTube, as well as on cna.asia. The team behind this week's episode is Saya Win, Clara Ong, Crispina Robert, Craig Dale, and myself, Teresa Tang. Thanks for joining us.